And here we are. Let's talk about the role of feedback and how feedback can actually make you a much better salesperson. Today on Sales Chatter. That was a crap hook. But anyways, hopefully if y'all are still here at work. But Ryan, today's a big day, buddy. So let me ask you this. When you first got in sales, how did you take feedback from people?
So there's so many ways you can go with this, right? So feedback in general. Are we talking feedback from like my direct report, my colleagues, taking feedback from like prospects I was calling on the phone, even from family, friends when I'm kind of like telling them that one-sided story. What are you thinking here, Dan?
So I'm glad you asked that because that was the answer I was hoping I would get from you by just kind of hitting you with that, because this is what I was hoping the first part of the conversation would be, is who do we listen to? And if we're listening, what do we pay attention to? And I think these are two big different things. So for example, family that maybe necessarily doesn't know much about logistics or anything about logistics.
Yeah.
You know, my wife has been in sales her whole life. Does she know everything about logistics? No. So I get feedback from my wife based on a personality, based on some words I use, based on the structure of sentences. Whereas in logistics, it'd be based on more of the industry slang, or, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. So my wife gives me great feedback from an overall sales perspective. So I listen to my wife on that. My coaches, I listen to them from a business feedback perspective. Like, here's your big things you got to do. Customers, I ask for feedback on my general sales. So in preparation for today, I called a couple of them and I said, listen, if you can give me some feedback on kind of, you know, my sales, what you would suggest I improve. And out of the 5 I asked, 4 of them actually said, you know what, Dan, the one thing I love about you is you sell without selling. Like, you sell through stories and we have conversation. And then I realize I want to buy this or get this lane or that lane. So I've realized that's pretty good feedback because I'm not coming across like a salesperson. They know I'm there to genuinely help them. Right. So I think feedback comes in so many different ways, Ryan, that let's just pick one and share with me what you think.
Okay. Okay, let's go with direct reports because I think at the top of the list in terms of sales, that's the one that matters the most personally.
Yep.
I would think. So my direct report at the beginning of my career, I was always open, but here's the reason why I was always open. I was in a unique position where I went from operations to sales. So I wasn't hired right away as sales. I think maybe my experience would have been a little bit different if I took the feedback, if I took it personally or anything like that. But I've already known this gentleman for about a year already, right? So I was actually his dispatcher, his ops person. So I got to know his personality, and then I understood that like he's somebody who I aspire to be like. You know, he had the lifestyle that I really wanted. So any feedback that he would give me, whether it be positive or negative, I would take it as like scripture, if that made sense. You know, if he's and what I did appreciate, I don't know how a lot of companies do it, but I know with at the company that I worked with, he spoke with IT, and any email that I sent or received, any email that I received, he would get copied on that. So he'd get like a blind copy on that email just to make sure everything is going good from there. And then he would kind of be like, okay, Ryan, well, if you tried this, why don't you try this? And I would think that it was one of the best things, like one of the best lessons I've learned from him when I was in the industry was I always quote, and I still do it to this day, Dan, I still quote all in rates. You know, I don't do the whole, and I know there's certain industries and certain customers that are like base plus fuel and stuff like that. I've never done that. However, for the caveat here, because it's not accessible for everybody, I did a lot of flatbed shipments because he did flatbed shipments. So I did a lot of open decks, and open deck is more of that. It's more of that all-in rate from there. So I think when it comes to feedback, I definitely took his as scripture because he wanted me to succeed. And then I found out, if anybody is a manager out there, and you want to talk money, because that's why we're here, you make money when your sales reps are doing numbers, right? So whatever, I want to say, whatever percentage you have off of their sales, you want to see them succeed. So with that being said, I took it as serious, and I would go to him, and I loved it. He kept his door open all the time. It never felt like a chore ever having to do. He's one of my best managers, and probably wouldn't be in this industry if I didn't start off at that company.
See, I love that you said that. You hit so many valid points. One, he had the lifestyle you wanted. He had the business that you wanted. So one of the first things I often share, especially with my kids, is pay attention to the source, right? So your manager was coming from a true place of giving and a true place of service, a true place of value, because he had business. He wanted you to succeed. So you took his suggestions, you took his feedback as gold, right? I think that's so important for us, if as paying attention to the source of where people come from, right? If he hadn't sold for 4 years and didn't have business and all this, you might have taken his suggestions a little bit differently.
100%. And
Mhm.
this is why I love this topic with feedback, because I might say something a little bit controversial here, but my life kind of changed a couple months ago when my wife actually brought this up to me, and she said, I don't take feedback from people who are doing less than me,
Mhm.
or they're in a position that I don't want to be in.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that's, like I said, it's a controversial, because it's like, oh no, you should listen to everybody. Everybody's a teacher and all this stuff. But, no offense to anybody out there, but if there's another sales rep who's they're not building the relationships that I want to build, they're transactional, or, they take it for granted. They got one customer and they just blame ops all the time, or blame customer service, and they never take full ownership of their life. Why would I want to take advice from them? Why would I want to be like them? Another portion of that, Dan, is, when we manifest plus hard work, and when you're getting that feedback, you're getting that feedback so that you can be better. I
Mhm.
don't think there's a lot of people out there who gives feedback so that they can make themselves personally better. It's to help that other person, like, hey man, I've been through this journey before. Here's what worked for me. And it's just
Mhm.
like, okay, well, maybe I like A and C. Maybe B might not work for me. But I think, especially in sales growth, this is an industry that, you can really truly grow. Like, we had a niche on last week, and he was talking about, when he was in university, he had no idea what he wanted to do with his life. And his professor came to him one day and was like, you are a born salesperson. You are meant to go build things. And she actually introduced him into his first company, which was Coca-Cola. And then he went from Coca-Cola to Pinterest to Flip to now owning his own company, where he's made, in his first year of his own business, he's made $500,000 already, his business, right? And you think about that, there's always going to be that person. And I know that we're going to be getting into mentors later on this week. But I think feedback in general, like, when you're giving feedback to your ops person, like, hey, if you can put on the load sheet, if we have this to kind of protect us. I think it's an ongoing conversation, and it's
Mhm.
never meant to be personal. And I think it can become personal, Dan, because I know you and I both have managers or colleagues where they're just fired up. It's the caffeine and the cigarette diet that they're on, and lack of sleep and things like that, right? But just take it with a grain of salt. And coming back to the point that I was making, was that, take advice from people that have the lifestyle that you want, where they want to be at in their terms of life right now. Because if you take something from below, then it's only going to just pull you down.
And that you the way that you switched it to personal, is something that truly hits home. And um, this is a thing when it comes to feedback, that sometimes we have to stop. And I'll give you a perfect example. Is last week, just before I left for BC, we had a managers meeting, and I got some feedback that I took very personal. And then when I was in BC, I was having conversations about it. And prior to landing, I realized that it was simply just somebody looking to help make things better. But because I put so much time and effort into it, I took it personal. So I had to apologize. I had to apologize to everybody, because I was like, you know what? If I came across um, frustrated or mad or pissed off or whatever, I really apologize. And Ryan, after 30 years of taking feedback and constructive criticism, and probably sometimes not so constructive criticism, I was blown away that I let it get to me like that. And
The one
that
meeting I miss,
whole
eh?
hmm?
The one meeting I miss, eh? And all
Yes,
hell breaks
it was,
loose.
but you know what? It was, and I think and here's the thing. I don't believe very many people, if any, wake up in the morning and say, I can't wait to destroy Ryan's
Yeah. I've
self-esteem.
learned that from you. I've actually learned that
Yeah.
from you in terms of
Yeah.
because obviously gripes and things like that. You know,
Yeah.
like day to day.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to you and you told me that, and that's really like changed my perspective. Like,
Yeah.
nobody's here to continue on, man.
I don't
That's
believe
the
so.
basis, yeah. No, I don't
Yeah,
think so,
I don't
man.
believe so. And I think sometimes we tend to forget that,
Mhm.
right? And I remember Damon saying something to me. He says, Dan, he says, this is where collaboration meets everything.
Mhm.
So he said, think about it like this. What if we all spoke about it before you went and did 7 hours worth of work?
Mhm.
How much better do you think it would be? And I was like, wow, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas we think sometimes in our heads, we're like, let's just go for it, go for it, go for it, go for it. And then it's like you put it out there and it's like, and it falls flat. You're like,
Yeah.
what the
Yeah.
heck just happened, man?
Well, it's like
And
when you do a video, right? And it's funny, Dan. It's funny how life kind of happens, and it's so true. And I truly believe that because I got some feedback even with our own company last week when I'm meeting people who have no skin in the game for us in terms of it doesn't affect them at all, so they can
yeah,
be truly honest, right? And I just think like when you're able to have those conversations with people and be open to that feedback, and kudos to you first and foremost, give you your flowers for accepting that because, like you said,
oh,
7 hours and you put this through. Like, there's so many times I've done like videos and I'm like, yeah, this is gonna blow, and then I just randomly do a stupid video and then that blows, right? And
yeah,
we've kind of learned that with different things, like you understand. You can't necessarily go viral, or you can't necessarily go through these certain steps and be like, okay, this is guaranteed. Like, there's nothing guaranteed in terms, even when we make those prospecting calls, there's no guarantee that they're going to pick up, even if you have a scheduled meeting with them. For all of our sales reps going out there, like you book this meeting, you've been prospecting for the longest time, they ghost you, and they're like, what the hell, man? And that's from there. And it's just like, there's no guarantees in life, right? And kudos to you for actually for seeing that and having that conversation with Damon, because like you said, if we have that conversation before we go ahead and start something, then the collaboration will be like, okay, cool. Or even if you're, like you said, 7 hours to do something, even if you checked in maybe every 2 hours, hey guys, this is
yeah,
what I've kind of built. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
yep,
I think that's pretty cool.
yep. And it, it. Here's the thing, right? Some people might say, be careful how many people you ask for feedback because it just will take the project and make it 10 times longer.
Mm.
Right. And then the flip side of that is you ask for feedback, somebody gives it to you, you don't take it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So then how does it make that person feel? And so I think there's so many sides to this feedback equation, right? So in sales, your direct report, for example, I don't know if you've ever had direct reports that you feel are out of touch, but it's like they give you feedback and you go back and either you try it, it doesn't work, or you just decide, what, it's not going to work. Forget about it for whatever reason. Let's just take everything out of the equation. For whatever reason, you don't use it.
Yeah.
How do we know? Right? Like, how do we know that was good feedback or not if we don't accept it or we don't use it? And I remember Bob Proctor telling me something. He says, Dan, here's the thing. Whenever anybody gives you anything, you mull it around and ask yourself, will this work, or will this impact me, or does it have the possibility of creating an impact for what I'm doing right now? And he says, and he said he truly believed that in the end, you will know. Like, there will just be something about you if you put it to the universe and you say, listen, just give me the opportunity. Will this work for me? And you allow your subconscious to sleep on it, right? He was very big about the subconscious. Before you go to bed, you talk to your subconscious mind and you let your subconscious mind work while you sleep. And he says, and a lot of the times, like you said at the beginning, you might have, out of the 5 pieces, you might take 1.
Yeah.
And then 1 from somebody else and 1 from other person. And those 3 pieces of advice or feedback now create this brand new experience that goes gangbusters. So I do think we should be open to it, but also understand exactly where it's coming from and
Yeah.
what the source is. Like I've had salespeople in the industry for 3 weeks teach me a little tidbit, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's great information." But did I listen to the 15 other pieces? No. And it's not an ego thing. It just didn't work with where my head was with my business.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
100%. And I think, Dan, what you just said about the three, it just reminds me of like that, timely, like evolution loop. And it's like, when you give feedback, you give it right away because you're more likely to actually practice that. Right. So Dan, if like I was to give you feedback, hey Dan, why don't you try this for the hook? You definitely try it on the next episode or something like that,
Yep.
rather than, hey Dan, I don't like your hooks. And when it comes to feedback, I want everybody to understand here, right? There has to be a positive and negative. And I don't believe in just giving feedback without hey Dan, you did amazing on your amazing speech on Wednesday when you were in BC, or Wednesday or Thursday, but here's something's kind of really taking it over the top. I'd be like, okay, listen, let me listen more, rather than, hey man, your stuff was the best thing I've ever heard. And then that ego we talk about, power of now, kind of gets there as well, because for me there's always going to be something. And I could talk about feedback as a musician as well, because it's something that is extremely important to me. When I go to play on stage and things like that, I always look for feedback, and I'm always the hardest person on myself. But then once I'm done my performance, people come up to me like, "Hey, man, you are so good!" Like, and out of the blue, people I've never met before, and I'm like, "Okay, that is good." But I like to reflect. I like to go watch. That's why a lot of athletes and all that stuff, they get better by watching game tape, right?
Yes.
And for sales reps, let's bring us back to legit sales reps. Record your calls. Do your videos that you're sending, and send it to people. Send it to other people. For what it's worth, send it to us. We'll give you that feedback as well. So understand that, you gotta have to role play. You gotta have to make sure that you're doing feedback, and make sure that you're doing things all the time. And one thing I learned from the event I went to last week, Dan, was that if you're gonna implement something, especially with feedback, give it 90 days. Do not like switch it up. Like if it, and this was more in context of like, say, doing video or something like that, but it's important for feedback. Anytime somebody gives you feedback, do it for 90 days, A/B test it, and understand that, okay, after 90 days, then you're more than likely, okay, let's try something different.
Yep. I agree with that. And it's, here we go. Somebody
Party, baby. Party.
Yeah, that's it. Live. I agree with that. I think that, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have as salespeople is when we change something up, it's like, I need to see the results now.
Yeah.
And how come it's not working now? Well, this was working before, and I had a conversation with a gentleman this morning, and I was asking him, like, how many replies do you get based on 500 emails? And he was sharing with me. And I said, would you mind sharing with me the email that you're sending? And I gave him a couple of pointers. And I can see originally he was like, he had this kind of like, I don't know, like he didn't really think that the point. And then I started explaining it. And I think this is one part about feedback that I personally believe really needs to be focused on is why. Why would you make those suggestions? What? And so what I did is I started explaining to him, I would say this because of XYZ. I would say this because of XYZ. I would say this because of ABC.
Yeah.
And the conversation immediately flipped. He was like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. That makes total sense. And I think, and then I start to go back, right? And I start to think about feedback I've gotten in my life and how I took it positively and negatively, right?
Yeah.
So one was, if you have high respect for somebody, you'll take their feedback usually verbatim. Right? Like when Bob Proctor would give me feedback, I would be all ears. When Brian Byro would give me feedback, I'd be all ears. When Rico would, I'd be all ears. All my coaches I've hired throughout my life and still have today, I would be all ears when they were giving me feedback, right? Because I think it's like you said, they've been there. They've done that times 10. So why do I want to make the same mistakes they made? Why wouldn't I learn from them?
Exactly.
Right? And then there's the secondary piece of feedback where sometimes if somebody's not as involved and isn't so into it, they're stepping out from a different perspective. And sometimes that feedback can be gold as well. And this is where we as individuals, I think, have to really pay attention to who we're taking that feedback from. So like you said at the beginning, you're tending to take more feedback from people that have been there. Because I think at this point, you're looking for specialized feedback. Would I be right or wrong?
I think so too. I agree. Yeah, 100%. Because it's like, I say this all the time, Dan, but I wouldn't take personal training tips for somebody who's overweight, right? It's just common sense. Like, if well, not common sense. My apologies. That's something that I just wouldn't do. And like you said, I wouldn't take advice from somebody that's higher. But I want to talk a little bit about that family
So
part
can I
because
ask you one part quickly? Just
yeah,
keep that thought, okay?
yeah,
Would you take advice from somebody who's maybe overweight but has shredded 60 pounds in the last 4 months?
probably not. I
Probably
look at
not.
the end.
Okay.
Probably not.
So
I look at the end result. The end result and and like they've done it in the 4 months and things like that. But they don't have for me, they don't have enough. Let's see here. They don't have enough time in the game, right? Like, it's just like, because there's so many options with, and especially with logistics reps too, right? There's so many options out there. Like, I can go find a personal trainer who's done this like all their life, and
mhm.
they've tried. Remember I said like the 90 days thing? So that person who's under that 4 months, they've only gone through that one cycle, so this is all they know and that's what works for them, right? So they could probably tell me like, the only thing that worked for me in the last 4 months was going keto. What if I don't want to go keto? Let's say
Mhm.
I have, or like they're using a certain diet, like cutting out sugar or something like that. Maybe I don't want to do that. There's this one personal trainer that I love so much that he's actually gotten fat, like on purpose. And then he's
Yes.
lost the weight like three
Yes.
times, I think
Yes.
it is. The
And
guy with
then
the
he was
tattoos.
actually on shows and stuff when he was
Yeah.
fat and saying,
And he's
okay,
like, I'm
so
going to do
watch
this
what
and
I'm
I'm going
going
to
to do.
show you. Right.
Yeah.
So, Dan, I would take his advice, obviously, because he's been there and done that from there. But with the family portion of it, I think when you look, you got to evaluate the feedback you're looking for before you just kind of blurt it out. Right. Before you go to a loved one or a friend, because they're going to be of a protection kind of mindset
Yes.
with you. Right. Because they just want to protect you. They love you. You mean a lot to them. Right. So if you go to them and be like, my boss was a friggin' jerk today, they'll be like, yeah, fuck that guy, as opposed to maybe I was the jerk, so it's
I
important that you
wasn't
understand the
fully
feedback.
present. I wasn't listening.
Yeah.
He asked me to do something. I didn't listen. I did the exact opposite. He got frustrated. Whatever. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah,
multiple ways,
how
right?
dare
Yeah.
he ask me to do this when I'm clearly at the water cooler talking to my friend about the weekend, like, does he not see my numbers? We're coming up to month end, like, who does he think he's talking to, right? And once again,
Yep.
that's ego, right? So
Yeah. It's I love that you brought that part up because um so many times we allow, and this has nothing to do with feedback, but I think it's a great point. We allow certain situations to literally ruin our day,
yeah.
right? Ruin our ability to get back in the zone. And I can tell you, as much as I hate to admit it, because I would like to think that over the years I've become smarter than that and more mature than that. But I remember the last time when just before I opened up high performance logistics sales and I was in corporate, and
Yeah.
I remember selling, and I came off an amazing year, and I had a disagreement with some higher ups in the company.
Mhm.
And I mean, and again, this is full on. This is like 2018, you know, right in the heart of when things were really good and things were happening. And I was, 26, 27 years in the industry. And I looked and I went, you know what? Screw that. I'm not making you any more money. And I stopped selling. And Ryan, I don't know how many times I've said it. You know what? You're not hurting anyone but you if you stop prospecting. Like, you know what I
Yep.
mean? Like, it's just, if you don't like the company, change companies and move on. And I remember vividly sitting there and going, no, screw you guys. I'm not selling.
Mhm.
No. You think I'm going to make you money when you're acting like that? And in the end, who lost? They
Yeah.
still went on to do a billion something, you know what I mean? And I just decided to put a break on what could have been one of, would have been if I would have had my foot on the gas for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Could have doubled my output from the year before.
See.
Easily doubled it, maybe even tripled. And it's funny. On Thursday, I'm on my way back I'm getting driven to the airport by a buddy of mine who I hadn't seen in close to 11 years. And we're talking, and he's telling me about putting his foot on the gas and taking my training and doing that kind of stuff. And I mean, the numbers he was doing was crazy. And you know what the first thing I thought of was, I would have done that if I wasn't such a baby. right? And I know you're laughing because this is a huge thing, and I think so many people do it, right? We get feedback that we necessarily don't like. We get some things are said to us that maybe are we take personally,
Yep.
and a lot of the times that when we take it personally, it's because it's true, and
Yeah.
we don't want to admit it to ourselves. And I look back at that and I go, the feedback he was giving me, in at my point in time when I heard it, it was like, how, like, no, but it was
Yeah.
true. And so now I completely allowed myself not to double and triple my income. I did it, not them.
Yeah.
I did it. Didn't make a glitch in their overall like desire to reach a certain number. But here I am sitting here going, oh, I got the upper hand because screw you. I'm not like, I mean, just mind blowing how sometimes your brain operates, and it just like it's stupid almost. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, it's 100% stupid. It's so, like when you think that you're more important than any company, that's you're already set to lose, man. Like nobody's important, and
Yeah.
for what it's worth, every company's gonna have like those couple reps who actually think that,
Yeah.
or even ops people. Like everybody within the company, it's just natural because it's like I'm busting my tail for this company. Look at the money I'm bringing, and then you realize, like you said, you're not a speck on their revenue at all. Like this company could go on without you, like million times more, a million times
Yep.
X, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like we said, it only really hurts you. Ed Milet had a great podcast last week where he's talking about, you want to see where you really are, like right now today. Look at the activities you did 90 days ago, 60 to 90 days ago. Like if you're eating healthy and stuff like that, if you are right now, and then use that as to understand like the next 90 days and go with feedback. And for everybody who's watching Logistics Sales Reps here, I encourage everybody to get feedback from people, and incentivize it too. And just don't ask people for things. Like don't keep on asking. You got to give as well. So like if you're looking to be a better husband or be a better salesperson or be a better anything in life, take somebody out for a coffee, ask them for their time, because time is something that, when it comes to feedback, it's what rings true, right? Because like Dan, like we said, we can get all this information from people saying, you should try A, B, C, Y. Well, you could try whatever you want, but if you don't do anything, then what was the point of asking somebody? That's
Mm-hmm.
something I think is imperative for everybody, for growth,
Yep.
at least.
I agree. Beautiful, brother. Well, here's the thing. So I think we should probably shut her down with this. For all of you watching and listening, take that advice Ryan just said. Get feedback. Sit down with people. Have a coffee. Ask them, or even just say, here's what I do. Like grab the top salesperson in your company. Grab the top salesperson grab, like, DM somebody and just say, even, hey, you got 20 minutes to do a Zoom coffee, and share with them how you do what you do, why you do it, and ask them if there's any, positive or constructive feedback they can
Yeah.
give you.
Yeah.
And, again, with everyone, including, and I've learned this over the past, including people you hold in very high regard, just like sales training, it's like everything. Certain things you're going to use and certain things are not going to be relevant to where you are right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important as an individual that you do that. You mull it over and you say, will this work? Help me. Will it work for me? If there's any possibility, do what Ryan said and give it 90 days.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ryan?
100%. And even the stuff that you don't connect with right away, sometimes you're going to be like dreaming or daydreaming about something, or you're going for a walk. You're going to be doing something that's robotic and it's going to hit you, and you're going to be like, hey, maybe I should try this, So take everything as importance. Like we said, some things it's like short-term and long-term goals, right? Some things are going to action right away and some things are just going to action in the future. But at the end of the day, that's like your subconscious going with it.
Yep. I agree. And you know what? It might not work for you now, but 2 months from now, you might remember that, and that might be the golden goose.
That might be the key, that might be the key that you've been looking for.
Yep. Yeah. Speaking of that golden key, hey, brother?
Let's go.